Farmers are the backbone of America. They are the men and women who work in the searing heat and bitter cold to put food on our tables and clothes on our backs. They rise with the sun to tend to crops and stay up late to review accounts. They fight off invasive insects and battle unpredictable weather. They are the ones who provide us food to eat. Since every person needs proper food for their living, so they are a necessity in society. There are different types of farmers, and they all have equal significance. Farming creates opportunities to lift people out of poverty in developing nations. Over 60% of the world's working poor works in agriculture. Farming creates more jobs, beginning with farmers, and continuing with farm equipment makers, food processing plants, transportation, infrastructure and manufacturing. Farming as a business, FAAB, is an extension approach to working with farmer groups during agricultural interventions. It is a form of private sector development to sustainably increase the profits of low-income, smallholder farmers. It involves technical and institutional capacity building. While farmland may stretch far and wide, farmers and ranchers themselves make up just 1.3% of the employed U.S. population, totaling around 2.6 million people. Today, there are about 2 million farms in operation in the U.S., a steep decline from 1935, when the number of farms peaked at nearly 7 million. The Midwest is the country's farming powerhouse. In the small farming communities of the Midwest, farmers often account for 1/3 of the population, especially in North Dakota, South Dakota, and Kansas. On the coasts, just 1 or 2 out of every 100 people work as farmers, even in rural areas. Agriculture is a major industry in the United States, which is a net exporter of food. As of the 2017 Census of Agriculture, there were 2.04 million farms, covering an area of 900 million acres, an average of 441 acres per farm.
Most 84% of the world's 570 million farms are smallholders, that is, farms less than 2 hectares in size. Many smallholder farmers are some of the poorest people in the world. Tragically, and somewhat paradoxically, they are also those who often go hungry. A shift towards small-scale farming can be an important stage of a country's development, especially if it has a large working-age population. But it's grueling work with poor returns. Small farms can achieve good yields but need lots of human labor and input. 2 Labor productivity is low. This is why countries move beyond a workforce of farmers. Younger people get an education, move towards cities, and try to secure a job with higher levels of productivity and income. A country cannot leave deep poverty behind when most of the population work as smallholder farmers. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization (FAO) has made incorrect claims about the world's reliance on smallholder farmers in the past. One of its reports states that small-scale farmers produce over 70% of the world's food needs. In other reports it has said that smallholder and family farms, which raises issues of how these terms are defined, produce 70 to 80% of the world's food. 4 This would mean that small farms produce nearly all of the world's food. This has become a zombie statistic, one that has been repeated by many other organizations despite there being no evidence to support it. 5 A key problem is that organizations, including the UNFAO, often use the terms small farms and family farms interchangeably. But they cannot, and should not be. As we will see later, these definitions give us very different estimates. This confusion creates several problems. First, it creates a misunderstanding, one that might convince us that a world of smallholder farmers is what we need. If they produced nearly all of the world's food, perhaps that is a future we would want to maintain. Second, it might make us concerned about the future of the global food system if countries move towards larger farms. As countries get richer, the average farm size tends to increase. If nearly all of the world's food came from small farms, perhaps we should be worried about this development. Is this concern justified? Researchers provide us with a better answer to this question of how much of the world's food smallholders really produce. How much of the world's food do smallholder farmers really produce? Several studies have tried to answer this question. The most extensive and recent comes from the work of Vincent Ricciardi and colleagues. 6 They produced the first open dataset on global food production, mapped by farm size. 7 It covers 154 crop types across 55 countries. It not only covers the amount produced across different farm sizes, but also the types of crops and what they are used for, whether they are eaten as food, used as animal feed, or for other uses such as biofuels. The chart shows their findings. This shows the cumulative total of three metrics: agricultural land, crop production, and food supply, with increasing farm size. So the top row of bars show the global total across farms less than 1 hectare, the second bar shows farms up to 2 hectares, etc. Smallholder farms are those that are less than 2 hectares. 0.8 That's the top 2 bars, which are shaded in blue. Smallholder farmers produce 29% of the world's crops, measured in kilocalories. 0.9 Less than half of previous claims. They do so using around 1/4, 24% of the world's agricultural land. They account for a bit more crop production than land use because smaller farms tend to achieve higher yields. 0.10 This is very labor-intensive work. Smaller farms get higher land productivity, but lower labor productivity. These farms account for an even greater share of the world's food supply, 1/3, 32%, but at 0.11 this is because smaller farms tend to allocate a larger share of their crops towards food, rather than animal feed or biofuels. To get to the 70–80% figure that was previously reported, we would need to include farms all the way up to 100 or even 200 hectares. These results shown here are in line with other studies which agree that the figure of 70–80% is much too high. 0.12 So while 1/3 of the world's food is still a large share, it's less than half of the widely cited claim. The claim that family farms produce 70–80% of the world's food is likely to be true. A recent study by Sarah Loader, Marco Sanchez, and Rafael Bertini agrees with the conclusion that small farms produce 1/3 of the world's food. 0.13 But they also estimate the share produced on family farms. The definition of a family farm is broad. It's one that is operated by an individual or group of individuals, where most labor is supplied by the family. This means they can be of any size. Many family farms are large, orders of magnitude larger than our under 2 hectare smallholders. They find that family farms produce around 80% of the world's food. To be clear, small farms produce 1/3 of the world's food. Family farms, of any size, produce 80%. These terms should not be used interchangeably because they are very different. Increasing the productivity of smallholder farming is a crucial step in countries transitioning from poverty to middle incomes. Raising the output and incomes of smallholder farmers should be an important focus, even if they produced very little of the world's food. This is because most of the world's farms are smallholders, and they are some of the poorest people in the world. We should avoid the romanticization of a future where most still spend their time working the fields for small returns. That would be a future where hundreds of millions continue to live in poverty. One U.S. farm feeds 166 people annually in the U.S. and abroad. The global population is expected to increase by 2.2 billion by 2050, which means the world's farmers will have grown about 70% of what is now unused. About 11% of U.S. farmers are serving or have served in the military. Cattle and calves, corn, and soybeans are the top 3 U.S. farm products. 86% of U.S. agricultural products are produced on family farms or ranches. Farming accounts for about 1% of the U.S. gross domestic product. After accounting for input costs, farmers and ranchers receive only 8 cents out of every dollar spent on food at home and away from home. The rest goes for costs beyond the farm gate: wages and materials for production, processing, marketing, transportation and distribution. In 2018, $139.6 billion worth of American agricultural products were exported around the world. The United States sells more food and fiber to world markets than we import, creating a positive agricultural trade balance. 25% of all farmers are beginning farmers, in business less than 10 years, their average age is 46. About 8% of U.S. farms market foods locally through direct-to-consumer or intermediated sales. Americans enjoy a food supply that is abundant, affordable and among the world's safest, thanks in large part to the efficiency and productivity of America's farm and ranch families. The pounds of feed, grain, forage, etc. a dairy cow needs to eat to produce 100 pounds of milk has decreased by more than 40% on average in the last 40 years. 1 acre of land can grow a variety of crops, including 50,000 pounds of strawberries or 2,784 pounds, 46.4 bushels, of wheat. Farm programs typically cost each American just pennies per meal and account for less than 0.5% of the total U.S. budget. Compared to 2012, the number of farm operators of Spanish, Hispanic or Latino origin is higher, up 13% to 112,451. There also are more black farm operators, 45,508, up 2%. Today compared to 2012,